This is for a more detailed follow-up to my 2017 video, Who Control on of Our Money. I'm going to focus on the United States in this video only because they the world reserve currency, but everything in this video affects on of us because the central bank around the world are on doing the same thing. With that being said, let's begin around the world. Today we see central bank printing money. So here a question. We tell from young age that money is hard to come by. We should study to work our whole life to earn is how then can earn this money suddenly come from nowhere. How is money critics who going to pay expect what exactly they're on of this mean and what going to happen next in the expo. Well, explore the three way that money being critics being and some of the consequences that are going to happen. I'm also going to show you the true origin of well inequality. If you want this people the whole way through, you should have a well-rounded idea of what's going on today. It's important for people to know. I'm really just trying to have that with that eternity star simple enough, but by the end, you start to see the intensity of what we're dealing with. You are watching co-function TV. The first form of money is one of created by government in practice. It also to the central bank royal mint, but controlled by the government. Physical money coming to form either paper money or coins. This physical money is a tiny fraction of the economic and in money economic. This kind of money only make up about 3 or 8%. This physical money is created in order to meet the obligation of private bank. When you go to an ATM and try to withdraw cash, bank need to make sure uh, that they have enough cash in order to meet the obligation. And let's take 10 not. For example, its cost is currently 3 cents. In order to bring this, no, this means that there impressively $9.97 of profit for creating a $10. No, this 9.97 of the government. This renew econ senior risk so seeing the government make profits from printing and minting coins and can reduce the amount of taxation on the public. You may be thinking, why don't government just away print physical money? The main reason that government don't create the majority and money is because a political. If you politician running the office could create money as well, there would be a massive conflicts and interesting. There will be a urge to keep printing to fulfill campaign promise of often were this will in the theory destroy and Korean by its cities printing causing massive devaluation. The more money you have in circulation to let it work, and that's a key for example it may see inflation take place and the away Troy has $1 million, but that $1 million only buy an apple. How much is $1 million actually worth? The loss in purchasing power of money over time is conflation, and when inflation get out of hand, money become worthless. Some recent examples, the runaway inflation include Argentina, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. In this elimination, you can graphically see just how fast inflation can run away. You don't see it coming, and as the inflation rate go up, people quickly low fell in the currency. For example, here we can see some people in Venezuela using money to make handbag and draw picture on because it simply isn't worth anything anymore. You can think of money as a measure stick of value or measuring stick. that is highly elastic and can change depending on how much of each there is. For thousands of years, gold were a measuring stick of value. Gold were kind of like a physical tool keeping the money supply in check, and government responsible in 1971 President Richard Nixon announced that the United States would no longer convert dollar to gold at a fixed value, saying that's why money order currency as a reserve currency. Nixon decision trying the world in on of this view may still not take that despite political support not being able to influence money creation. It happened anyway. This may cause problem as well. See later in the expo. So to recap, the government create physical form of money like note and coins. Only about 3 to 8% of money is made this way. Side right, either income from that physical money. This income impose benefit to the government and the taxpayer. It reduce that for the government and reduce the burden on the individual taxpayer. The reason government don't create more of this money is because of the inflation risk from political decision. Let's move on to number two, private bank, and that pay money the best amount of money created. Today is done by the private banking sector in small developed economics. About 97% of entire money supply is created digitally by bank, and therefore most money in the world in the private bank intended digital money. When they manage to pursue lawmaker after many early bank run a bank run an event where this voter try to get their money out of the one, but the bank don't have it from the event bank argue that they should have clearly allowed to create more disposal than actually access by open debt, and this is how government outsources to the creation of digital money. The idea of using debt has money begin much earlier than this month. English innovator set the stage for banks to become the creator of money across the global. In 1704, the English Parliament passed the Promissory Notes Act. Take a good look at your screen. What you are seeing a promissory note in the case is written promise to say that you pay back the 10 uh, you borrow under the law. This fee of paper were as good as $20. Today we decide this agreement and call it debt. If it has, whenever I say debt in this is for, you can think of the P of the paper, remembering that it as good as money. Okay, to bank will emphasize to be able to use the debts know to calculate and money from this point paying were free to create a destroy debt and hand money from themselves return out. The interesting the modern world as you see the whole world economy is very open the promise. Let's take a look at how it's worked today. We will go to bank and borrow some money. The banking license give the bank the ability to create money every time they issue too long. They do this through the double accounting system. For example, if you buy a 500,000, how the bank create 500,000 in their account, and you have 500,000 in debt. That's either promise to pay is back, and with interest, this 500,000 debt can enter the wider economic system because when you purchase the house, the owner of that house can use that spread debt that were created by the bank that they receive from you to buy other things in the economy. This means in our current system, if we want to have more crowd, we need more debt. The key point here the that's debt actually money from just from a different point of view to the lender is an asset of money into the poorer is liberty of debt, but they are one of the same. It sounds a bit conflicted. This is because banks have decided that's the safe, yes, more profitable form of the credit debt because if you can prepay too long, the bank can simply take you out in developing nation vast amount of money to back by the MOA market in US, Australia, where I live, it's become particularly bad for decade now. The bank have abandoned investment into the wider economy and have shifted their focus to investment in housing. This has pushed up the housing price as people take on more debt to buy house that they could afford. But the bank makes more money. This cycle over many decades has caused one of the biggest property people on the planet. We did addicts to debt. Yes, we were adapt educate to deaf individual as household. You know the radio and are higher than on this every other country. So that land bus. What about deposits? We need to put a cash into a bank. You are no longer the legal owner of the money, and the banks idea keep 10% of you deposit and reserve, and can lie out 90% of the money to someone else, and that other person can deposit that money into another bank, and then that bank can loan out 90%, and so on. This is now a practical reserve lending. If they say, well, transfer it to your account, that's wrong because no money and transfer as on. Because what they are can't expose it as simply that's record of its debt to the public now. It also out you have money and it's record of the money is all you either what you think you getting as money, and that's it on its event on its set and done an interior deposit 100 with a tempest and reserve requirement and anything lead to $1,000 in total money cancellation. Well, at least that were how it used to work into March and 26 2020. There is now a 0% reserve requirement according to a Federal Reserve quote to the action limitation reserve retirement for a depository institution. And well, so bank can now retire infinite amount of money with no reserve, and it doesn't stop there when bank house bank amount of money with no reserve. Household deposit they can along with have fun gamble with it through investment and financial instruments such as and security. They do this in order to make super reserve return more of the time. The instruments are basically just bet on if the price of an asset will rise or fall. But when taken to the extreme, it can get ridiculous. Remember to in every video how I talk about how they use finance instrument to bet on the weather. The crazy classy of financial instrument is what brought down the housing market and the suburban global economy in 2008. But the problem today is the Dutch bank are playing with so many sometimes stacked on top the each other with layer multiplying factor that nobody actually know how much money it tie up in the climbing some estimate, but the diversion derivative market as over 1 quadrillion dollar, over 10 times the global economy income. Every tax on that is long from a bank, and they spend is one thing that's normally could afford, but this bigger economic crowd eventually people can afford to take on debt, and economy take a downturn. It is natural and has happened over a century, but in 2018 Everything trained the world didn't want to go through the pain of the downturn, and some analysts make this as the very point that the real economy died in 28 has become so large, intertwined, and integral to the supply of the money. That's when they are about the collapse. The government had to use the central bank to bail them. I'll remember bank the creating 97% of the on money as that if they can be best uh, back in can cause a systemic failure or risk of collapse of the anti-global monetary system. Since 28, the economy were this, but we have been left luxembourg ever since the decade of hyper low interest rate, which basically make the cost of borrowing money through a cow market distortion. So like the has compounded the entire problem. There were short-term gain for the consequence of long-term pain when private bank make risky bet and incur loss contraband and rescue them with their infinitely wallets as mentioned by Fed Chairman Jerome Powell in the recent interview of CNBC. 60 minutes fair to say you simply flooded the system with money. That might be bad we get to central bank in the next section, but as you soon see, we have to pay the debt back on of this money that's being created like the piece of paper we saw with the promise on the SF inside by on of us, and we say that's going to pay the pack through taxation us and our future generation. Important to note that government don't actually support the people. It's the people that we support government through taxation and trade are the two major way that government can raise money. This raise money is used to pay back the central bank loan. This interesting. So when the government use the central bank to pay out private bank for their risky behavior, the government and left with the debt, which eventually has to the pay the taxpayer in the future. So to recap, private bank create the best majority and money about 97% of it, and they do so by creating long with in depth the project a symbol extracting number into the computer bank can to an extent spend and gamble consumer dispositives as they luckily out is too big to fail bank are backed up by the central bank creating a moral hazard, and that brings us to the final and most essence from the money creation central bank digital money, the 7 million billion dollar bailout bailout of QA, where every control several piling out Wall Street is the only way to say Main Street. So say the president, the house of the car were much bigger beyond start to strict beyond just Wall Street. They how the president depend on of the last get proposed financial reserve plan in U.S. history treasury. The part of the congressional server are working through the weekend hammering of the detail. The president plan would allow the treasurer to buy up to $700 billion worth of the ban long like many of those surprise multi deal, but though back then go on American public staff contracts will have to write a legal limit on the nation debt from 10.6 trillion to 11.3 trillion dollar. It was though to be a one of emerging, but over the next decade, the Federal Reserve were unable to reserve it. To give you an idea of how significant on of this war it took from the variation of American in 1766 uh, on the way up to 28 for the nation up at 10 less than the $1 trillion in debt by 2014. That number has expanded to 4.4 trillion, and since the on set of the cover pandemic, 3 trillion were at in the span of 3 months. Now the U.S. central bank is creating hundreds of billions of dollars in mere hour. It's seeming to have less of an effect as it continues. We have a lot of good fail based on the brow of the U.S. printing press. I mean, the United States maintain reserve currency status. It's very money, though. That's not real money. That's fake money. That's true. And I'm sure I'm now at a fake money. Oh, really? I know. But it's on pay on fair. How long it is? How long is suitable? Though how to go at the piece, the arguments, then become about the taxpayer who picks up instead. Let me get this straight. You can constantly bail yourself out, and you can constantly go bring money with this quantitative easing. Why the hell to do I have paid taxes? Why do I pay taxes? They are the sick of social unrest. In this country, you can only derive so big of a wealth between the have and the haves not, especially when you getting out the middle class in the projects. The Federal Reserve monetizing the U.S. debt is the navel on up this. So how the money into the system central bank give the basic money to buy a equivalent amount of the bond from the government. They do this through the bond market with access to lend money to corporation or a government under the stock market get more breaks the bond market actually because what is the point of the purpose of this video. uh, it's basic the same at that, but it's issued by a government and corporation central bank. We have to saving can creating money to buy the pawn. So he an important question: can a central bank go bankrupt? Well, according to the Urban Central Bank, which public paper in 2016, central bank protected from insolvency due to their ability to create more money. If you think this sounds a bit unfair, just why government in our current situation is stuck between a rock and a hard place. They can raise money except for raising tax, but our trillion to central bank the half either the borrow money can kickstart an economy, but something else is happening. When I first hear of this a few years ago, I simply couldn't believe it were legal. The central bank are creating money out of nothing and they can go bankrupt, but yet they buy in real assets even total can see something is wrong. Here it turned out they creating money out of nothing by anything that have consequent. This shock of central bank intervention remote stock market from reality through the 20th century. The stock market actually used to reflect the economy, but recent that gun conflicts out of what of the U.S. stock market has become almost twice as big as the entire nation GDP, which literally make no sense. Central bank intervention, the mentioned reserve, but they have no idea where it's coming from. I'm going to show you in three charts saying the 1980, the wealth of the upper echelon of society has been tied to the stock market since 28, when the economy went to slight support the stock market become glued to the Federal Reserve. The more they bring, the more of the stock market go up after Richter. They become in 1980. Their wealth has grown 420%. When central bank print money, the first risk price repayment and thus newly bring money enjoy higher standard of living at the expense of the later recipient of the money when inflation had already taken hold of the phenomena now as the one effect expert believe that's when the rich finally start selling their stock and real estate so as to buy other assets in time of distress the money velocity that's either rate and with money trend hand in the economy we start to pick up. And that's it when we start seeing real inflation in the general economy. There is so much more to it. I think printing money is only and bank as the real solution were either past decade ago society and nation should have focused on wealth creation instead of excessive housing financialization and claiming that the bank should have made long to productive area of society small and medium business entrepreneur education manufacturing innovation research and development on of the kind of thing just amazed how our world would be today if bank spent hundreds of billions of dollars into the kind of thing instead of property to climbing and if they price something will go up the, or down just image it's richer for the bank but the benefits lead to more job more innovation better competition and better living standard in the long run. Also, government and collects more taxes from the income without necessarily raising taxes. The extra tax from generally higher living standard can then be spent on social programs to help those who are truly in need to can bring money, but you can bring wealth, but focusing on wealth creation or productivity take time, efforts, and hard work, and it just seems today that people don't have to appetite for the and for us, and frankly, it's too late for this option if we focus on funding wealth creation before cover hits on our economy, which we less left frail. Most individual and business would have a hell amount of savings to ride it out like in the late 20th century, but for now you just going to have a deal with the consequence of a frail system. So what going to happen next in my view? I think this is ongoing to lead to something very big and unpleasant over the next decade and don't know how it's going to look like, but it may involve massive amount of deflation and slow economic growth in situation now as a stagflation. This happened in this 1970, but this time it could be much worse due to excessive amount of debt with the S effect of social instability in the mainstream will either eventually the world will lose value in the US dollar through some macroeconomists think that American dollar may actually rise in value as other nations try to sell their goods or exchange fairly current for the US dollar because it's the clean economy of the world if failure economy is con of the dollar say theory some people think that digital stable cost will be able to solve a lot of problem there are others still who argue the Dutch nation can bring infinite amount of money just as long as they keep produce enough good to pay the extent interest on the debt that the government or the central bank the argument here is that the debt actually never had to be paid back only the intrinsic the econ modern monetary theory I can comment on if this will work or not. I don't think anyone can be scared. It never been tried before, but I can have I but think that this look like another viable solution. Small community in Venezuela and a small town in Italy have taken a power pack themselves and just issue their our currency on who now. What going to work? I have no idea on the bright side on of the event to come May for basic reform as I did learn while writing my book out of the world's correction, the best innovation right. So what can individual do? Obviously, I can give financial advice. I'm definitely not qualified for that, but it's maybe who thinking about converting some of your money into other assets that and death pay as a form of insurance. If you are out there, you may be thinking about going sing to central bank can bring gold bank of American and even Goldman Sachs the last people on us hear you and think to be positive I'm single Pontino and they calling it the money of the last resort. Even other central banks like China and Russia have been buying gold in record amount for years. I think they understand what about to happen if you younger. You may be attracted to government and the banking system are starting to take technology seriously now. If you more daring, you can play the central bank game again them study and expand in the assets that you think they how to write in pride Emily. I can tell you what to do here. You have to think for yourself and research to find out what you believe in. That's the way money in critics and the overall banking system seem like messiness and people have started to notice that their system is no longer working the monetary system increase and so Brexit is become too invisible to see nobody ever question it. When things started going wrong, they point at the thing that's were visible thing that look like problem surface issue which you could see and understand looking at the surface. Some would point four finger as complexion, but you have to dig deeper and when you do can see it unfortunately and untimely miss of the death pays system, extreme financial relation, moral hazard, and repayment sentinel effects thus causing extreme fragility and ever-increasing amount of machine well in inequality.